The topic of today is training needs an assessment. Now, as you all know, training has got its own importance, and of course, trained people are better than untrained people. So is the importance of training in the organizations of today. Most of the training in the organization is achieved informally, often on the job. However, training must be a formal process directed towards a practical performance-related objective. Now, definitely, to be very effective, it must be a planned one, it must be a structured one, and of course, a structured intervention into an informal day-to-day learning. Now, definitely, the training has got its own importance. Every now and then, the environment is changing, the dynamics is changing, the government policies are changing, so is the boardroom agenda changing. So, in this changing regime, which is dynamic in nature, there has to be a preparedness, and a preparedness can come only when the training program is inducted into the organizations. Now, training definitely has its own importance in your day-to-day activities also. And of course, if it is a structured one, if it is a planned one, then of course, the benefit it is going to offer to the organizations has its own mileage, has its own advantages. Now, its effective increases if it involves someone else, that is a trainer, a teacher or a coach, and to suggest the organize and control what they learn. So, definitely the effectiveness will come only when we have these people with us. A trainer put in its heart and soul into it, a teacher puts its best, a coach will always envelop all those activities which are going to train the individuals, and definitely to suggest and organize and control what they learn. Now, after having understood the importance of training program, the important task of the management is imparting the same. And of course, training is an abstract managerial function which has tremendous advantages and are not apparent immediately. The output, the outcomes and the results of the training is seen as and when we progress in our activities, in our operations, in the day-to-day activities of the organizations. It's not that today the training program is over, so you're going to see the advantages there and then. No, the advantages will be seen little after the training programs are over. But it is a very important managerial function and involves all the steps required for the other managerial functions. Design and management of training program is very crucial to be very effective. Now, I am going to explain you the principles of the training program. A successful training program should be based on the following principles. The objectives, the scope of training plan should be defined before its commencement to provide a basis for a common and cooperative action. Now, definitely the part which we are going to cover, the activities which we are going to envelop in that training plan, everything has to be meticulously planned. The trainer, the trainees, and definitely the input has to be taken from so many other stakeholders in the organizations, that what do they want, what is the outcome, what are they expecting. So, after incorporating the inputs from the various stakeholders who are definitely going to matter in the organization and its objectiveness and its performance, the overall perspective is framed, which we call as a training plan. So, basically, when you talk about the principles of the training program, it has to have certain principles. So, I am going to explain you the first one. The objectives and the scope of a training plan should be defined before its commencement. So, there has to be a pre-program, a commencement program before it is actually implemented. Second, the techniques and the process of a training program should be related directly to the needs and objectives of an organization. It should have a relevance to the job requirements. It must be flexible to incorporate the difference among the individuals as regards ability, aptitude, etc., the learning capacity, the emotional makeup, etc., and it shall prepare the trainees mentally before imparting any knowledge or skill. So, these two points which we have just discussed needs further explanation. Definitely, when you talk about the process and the techniques which we are going to incorporate in the training program, it should be directly related or indirectly related to the needs of the organization. Any activity which is absurd, which is not connected to the organization effectiveness, performance, cannot be a part of a training. So definitely the training is centered around the need and objectives of the organization, and wherein we want to enhance the performance, wherein we enhance the skills. So these programs should be centered around that, followed by the program which we are going to start must be flexible. Why? Because when you start the programs with a different ability, with a different aptitude, you need to make certain changes into it. So you should be prepared for that, because you don't know what kind of people, because they are the first ones who are taking the training. So it must have a feature of flexibility into it, because the training batch comprises of the people with the different abilities, with the different attitude, with the different aptitude, with the different learning capacities, and of course with a different emotional makeup. So considering so much of diversity, you cannot have a fixed program. You need to have little flexibility into whatever you do, and it shall prepare the trainees mentally before imparting any knowledge or the skills. Now, the training must use a time-tested principles of learning, and as far as possible, training should be conducted in actual job environment and by well-qualified and experienced trainers. It should emphasize both the theory and the practice for acquiring the knowledge and the practical applications. It shall have the support of the top management, which can greatly influence the quality of the training, and it shall have a system of a critical appraisal of the outcome of the training efforts. Now, a very important topic: what and how are the determining of the training needs? The identification of the training needs is the stepping stone in a proper training management system on which the entire edifice of a training program is built, because you have to identify the training needs, and that is the basis for any kind of a training program. And it attempts to take a very specialized and individualized view of the training needs. It is done in the light of an overall objectives of the organization and the specific requirements of the individuals. The effective performance of a job requires a standard of competence in the job holder, consisting of a job related knowledge, skill and attitude. Hence, the performance appraisal may indicate the training needs. Now, for example, you are doing some kind of an assessment or the appraisal of an individual, which are definitely job related, to understand the competencies of the job holder, that what is his basic level, what is his skill level, what is his consistent level of gaining of the knowledge, and how is he performing. So after doing an in-depth analysis of all these things, you will definitely come on to the final point, that is, what kind of training does he need. Is he performing well? Then of course the training needs would be less. If he's performing low, then of course you have to work on those parameters, those paradigms, those frontiers in which he is actually weak. Now, taking it forward, training needs can also be determined on the basis of activity analysis, the analysis of the problems and the analysis of the behavior. The process of assessing and finding the gap between the standard competence required in the job and the existing competence in the vital knowledge, skill and attitude of the job holder is identification of the areas of deficiencies. Now, what are areas of deficiencies? The areas of deficiencies are clear-cut those particular areas which needs improvement, which needs an enhancement of the skills, which needs the enhancement of the knowledge, and that will only come with, and which the gap can be covered only by the extensive and the specific and the focused training programs. So with these kind of training programs which are really focused, which are really narrow, you're able to take out and bridge the gaps and fill the deficiencies. So coming on to another point, inventory of the gaps in the job holder in terms of the skills, knowledge and attitude constitutes the training needs. Now definitely you have to understand what the gaps are, you have to find out the inventory of the gaps of the job holders, and you have to define those areas in which the training program has to be defined, and you have to give these kind of an input to the training department, and the training and the development department will incorporate your suggestions, your feedback in terms of in what particular areas the training requirement is there, and then definitely they are going to design a very good training program. Now training needs can be assessed under two situations, that is under the ideal and less than ideal. The two approaches to identify the training needs are the role analysis and the job analysis. Role may be defined as a set of expected behavior of a person occupying a leadership position in an organization. The factors determining the role are personal qualities, growth perceptions, values, ambitions, organization's internal and external integration, and environmental sensitivity. A job is defined as a set of tasks assigned to a position. Organization expects a fair behavior from the position holder in line with the assigned job and task. The role can be static, it can be dynamic, it can be personal. While job is static and impersonal, the three processes are involved in identification of the training needs. That is, the role and the job analysis, organizational analysis, and individual analysis. Training needs of the employees within an organization are varied. The marketing department may train its people in the sales, motivation, leadership, teamwork, and communication. The HR department may focus on the motivational strategies and communication and the team building activities. Definitely the companies offer the higher end services of professionals and consultants to provide such training programs. The mentoring given by the experts has a very positive impact on the employee morale and the results, and often reflect in increased productivity of the training employees. In order to determine the training needs within an organization, the personnel manager should seek the information on the following points. Now these are very, very important, whether the training is needed and whether the training is needed or not. So probably the problem, you have to find out the problem areas, you have to find out the standards, you have to find out the labor turnover, you have to find out the high rate of transfer, and all assessment of these factors will definitely going to give you whether the training is needed by the people or not, and to what extent and to what level. Now we are coming on to the environmental context in the training need and identification. Generally, it is stated that a training need exists when there is a gap between the present skills and the knowledge of its employees and the skills and the knowledge they require or will require for an effective performance. While identifying the training needs, it is important to take into consideration the environmental context. Specifically, this would include the national and organizational context within which the organizations are working. Training is highly influenced by the current developments in this context. In general, the environmental context for identifying the training needs include the following features. The workforce of today might not have a fixed office, nor would they have any working hours. The older rules of the compensation, career advancement, job security, etc. are no longer true and are no longer applicable. The training needs have to accommodate this flexibility also, because the working environment, the context, the situation has been changed over the years. So what was applicable in the yesteryears is not applicable in the current years. The present day integrated economies have led to the convergence of the markets and the organizations. Organizations are working across the boundaries and have a diverse mix of attitude and the work environment. Training has to incorporate these while designing any training program. There are no qualifications for a job, and this flexibility allows the people from diverse skills backgrounds to work in an organization. The training needs must be based on these diversities. The increasing stress due to continuous self-development and undertaking responsibility for own learning. The training needs have to comply with these and often rapidly changing patterns of the government, intervention for control, encouragement, provision and the funding of vocational education and training, and the various initiatives launched by the government departments. The effects of legislation and the national economic policy on the organizational markets and the policies. For example, if an organization wants to train its sales force, it has to apprise them of the laws relating to the sales tax and the consumer protection. A personnel department must be clear of the prevailing labor laws. The pace of technological development and the job changes, which is increasing the requirement for the learning needs to be quickly and continuously re-identified. Technology has created a paradigm shift in the human resource management, and the present age of competition need flexibility in its approach towards the human resource management. The simple definition of a training needs can be a starting and a starting point, and as with the organization activity, a training intervention will require the resources, support and some structured activities. There may be a cadre of instructors or on the job trainers, an open resources center which people are encouraged to use, an external or internal courses or a program of a planned experience. To be practical value and enable the training decisions to be made, the training needs identification must recognize the resources, the implied, and make a supporting case of those responsible for making the decisions about the resources allocation. The case has to be demonstrated that the need described is directly related to the operating policies, priorities, opportunities and the problems and to the budget constraints. Indeed, a preliminary identification may be necessary in order to justify the expenses and the time of a more detailed exercise. Now, training need identification should describe and justify in terms of the cost and benefits of what has to be learned. These are about the characteristics and the circumstances of the learners and the opportunities and the constraints present in their work environment. Now we are moving on to the sources for identifying the training needs. A good system of a training starts with the identification of the training needs. Following are the sources which can be used for identifying the training needs. First, the performance review reports. Performance review reports help in identifying the directions in which the individuals should be trained and developed. And on the basis of the annual appraisal reports, various dimensions of the training can be identified. Training needs are identified on the basis of performance appraisal, provide good information for organizing in-company training and on-the-job of training for a select group of employees. The day-to-day events such as operating problems, staff shortages, faults or complaints, or the inability of the staff to handle the new system might indicate a problem. The second is potential appraisal. The training needs identified on the basis of the potential appraisal would become inputs for designing the training programs or work out the training strategies for developing the potential of a selected group of employees who are identified for performing the future role in the organization. Then we have a job rotation. Working in the same job continuously for several years without much change may have demotivating effects. Some organizations plan job rotation as a mechanism of maintaining the motivation of the people. Now, training is very crucial in preparing the employees before placing them in a new job. Besides these, Most of the training programs, they are organized aimed at equipping the manager with a new technology. These training programs nowadays attempt to help the managers raise their present levels of effectiveness. And definitely, the training programs nowadays which are conducted across all organizations, because no organizations can do away with the training programs, because nobody is, born trained. You need to train them. You need to give them what they want. You need to enhance their skills. So if you want all these outputs and the outcomes for the organization to enhance their performance, you need to give a good training programs to them. And of course, this kind of an attempt is done across all the organizations to enhance the present level of effectiveness. The next point is the individual's self-assessment. Sometimes individuals come to appreciate their own deficiency in terms of their knowledge, skills or attitude. In the supportive environment, ignorance of some fact is not regarded as a sign of weakness. In such situations, the individuals themselves may state the training needs. Acceptance by individuals that they have a learning gap which cannot be filled in the informal learning. Such a self-assessment is an important first step in securing a positive attitude of mind towards taking part in training aimed at remedifying the situation. The next we have a systematic investigation. Despite a careful top management and receptive individuals in an organization, not all requirements for the training emerge in the ways mentioned above. Important needs are identified through the different forms of systematic investigation. These include carrying out the training audits and setting up of the needs identification projects. Systematic methods like interviews, questionnaires, job task analysis, assessment centers, diary keeping, fault analysis are described in most of the books and the booklets on the planned training and form an essential part to reappropriate of the training staff. Used without discrimination, some of these methods can be mechanistic and time consuming and do not always reach the roots of a problem. The skill and the perception in the use of the tools of the systematic analysis is necessary while undertaking these exercises. The structured assessment. The training needs may also be identified in a structured way by making sure that the consideration of the training implications is built into an organization policies, systems and procedures. These include the process of deciding about the implementing objectives or introducing the changes and of increasing importance staff appraisal systems. The latter have a crucial role to play in securing that individual owns his or her learning needs and has a chance of contributing to their recognition. Then we have a peer review. Another method of achieving the recognition and acceptance of the learning gaps is to involve the people in a review of the current work practices. In such exercises, identifying training needs is a hidden agenda item. This can be particularly effective when the individuals concerned are critical of the present arrangements and feel that the management will take their opinions seriously. Now we move on to the scope of the training needs. There are two classes of the training needs: the micro training needs and the macro training needs. So these are the two scopes of the training needs. The micro, as the name suggests, training needs exist for just one person or a very small population. Macro training needs exist for a large group of employees, frequently in the entire population with the same job classification. Logically, the training needs must apply to individuals at whatever level in the organizations, but the scope and the grouping of the application varies considerably. Consequently, the scale and the characteristics of the related training also varies. So does its importance and the cost. The scope of the training needs can be identified under the three categories. at the level of all individuals is the first category. There are some training needs which may cover everyone in the organization. For example, when the development and the survival of a business depends on much greater willingness on the part of its managers and workforce generally to accept the change, or where the whole business is moving to a new business size. In the present times of disinvestments of PSUs, computerization and the corporate restructuring, many organizations undertake the exercise of imparting the training to everyone in the organizations. Every individual has to relearn the newer skills to work in a newer environment. Example of Balco disinvestments, computerization of SBI are some of the typical cases. Next, we have specific groups in an organization. This category of training relates to a specific group of the people within an organization, although it is less wide in its scope. There may be a particular unit, department or section at a certain level, such as supervision or within the particular occupation, or exercising a particular function such as designated safety officers. An example is when a new information system linking all the retail outlets of a major chain store leads to a requirement for the training in the use of online computer terminals for a certain grades of staff in the branches. In the armed forces, specific strike groups are trained for the counter insurgency for anti-terrorist operations. When Election Commission of India decided to use the electronic voting machines, that is the EVMs, it undertook the task of training the groups who were to perform the job. The third category relates to a particular individual example of the personal specific learning needs, like preparing an employee for a new job. When a person is shifted from one department to another department, he needs to get trained for the new responsibilities, activities in support of the career or self-development. For example, a person getting trained before getting promoted to the next position. The remedial training or the coaching where the work performance is not up to a standard. Example, an employee might need a training, specific training or counseling to be able to perform better. Now, updating the training, for example, the training might change. The organizations might have to update the training of the individuals. Now we have the components of the training needs statements. Monitoring and evaluating to check the changes being implemented are having the desired effect of meeting the needs of the target population. The statement of needs should aim the following: achieving the commitment of resources by demonstrating that such a commitment is warranted, enable the informed decisions to be made about the kind of resources and whether they should be focused or not, and then we have to provide the information that enables the relevant and effective provisions of the learning resources to be planned. Now, some of the most important features that the personnel and the training specialist should consider in meeting these aims are a target audience and the training needs as discussed in the training matrix, objectives of training. The overall objectives of the training program and the performance requirements should be very clear. The training strategy should depend upon the clarity of the objectives to be achieved, justification of the training, operational justification, priority and the urgency of the training should be considered. Priorities can rarely be neatly or cleanly established, and they may look different from the different advantages points in the organization, or managers with a different interest, they can be merit in the opportunities. So the type of the training needs is the next point. It must be stated whether the training needs are once and for all, it is recurring in nature, it is continuous in nature, or it is changing. It must be specified whether they require the small amounts of training or more substantial long-term learning, or are complete areas of the knowledge, skills or qualifications required. Next we have is the kind of the learning required. The nature of the training, whether it consists of a theory or the knowledge of adaptation and development of the existing expertise of the particular know-how of a need to be exposed to the new ideas or the sources of the information or of changing the attitudes. The training process would depend largely on these issues. Next we have the objectives of the trainees. The trainees must be judged for their present range of experience and knowledge, their likely motivation to learn and the learning styles, their availability for the training, the characteristics and the circumstances of the working environment which might help or hindering the learning. The training is for the trainees and their characteristics have a lot of impact on the effectiveness of the training process. The 7th point is the organization itself. The organizational factors are also an important factor while preparing a statement of the needs. Some of the organizational issues to be considered while assessing the training needs are: is the organization culture hostile? It is neutral? It is supportive to the training or not? What opportunities or the constraints are there as far as the traditional form of trainings are concerned? Who currently has the access to the training and of what kind? What facilities and opportunities do or could exist at the workplace or elsewhere? What is the strength of the organizational commitment to the vocational education programs or continuing development? The 8th point is the kinds of the training provisions. The provisions of the type of the training can influence the effectiveness. The learning strategies acceptable to the organizations and the trainees also needs to be considered. Rosett has defined and summarized the need assessment process in an organization, which can be presented in the form of the following table. The first we have the basis, then we have the steps, and then we have the tools. The optimal situation, the actual situation, the causes, and the people's feelings and the solutions. You have to select the sources to be contacted. Determinants of the stages are assessment, select and use the needs assessment tools. Then you have to create the items questions to use in seeking the information, and of course consider the critical incident analysis. And for the tools we have the interviews, we have the documents, then we have the observations, and then we have the focus groups. The basis of all the training should be the achievement of the optimal situation from the actual situation. The actual situation is a representative of the pre-training scenario in an organization. It is indicative of a gap in the current situations and the current systems. The optimal solution is one which is intended to be achieved out of the training. It is an outcome of the change that has been initiated by the training, and in an organization there can be several causes of the training. The environmental context, the organizational issues and the attitudes and the feelings of the people, both the trainees and the trainers, need to be considered while assessing the training needs in an organization. The effective solutions are the consequences of the series of activities thus undertaken, and as shown in there are several steps to be which needs the assessment. These include the selection of the sources to be contacted for imparting the training. The stages of the assessment needs to be worked out. The selection of the right need assessment tools have to be made, and the tools used are the questionnaires, which effectively depends upon the information collected. In order to collect the right kind of information, the selection of the questions becomes very important. However, in the organizational context, the opinion survey can be effective method of the questions selected. The view of the people who need training, their supervisors and the top management can provide the vital clues which can help to select the right questions. Some organizations make use of the critical incident analysis as well. The critical incidents can be a situation which shows the need of the training. It becomes a starter for any kind of a training process. Even the normal reports, such as the increased number of the customer complaints, the strikes, the dysfunctions, conflicts, etc., can be certain critical incidents which can initiate the training process in an organization. There are several tools available at the disposal of the trainers to identify the training needs. The most commonly used tools are the interviews, the documents containing the organizational records, the survey, the observations, and the focus groups. Each of these have certain advantages and as well as the limitations, and the trainers have to choose between these depending upon the specific organization's situations. Now we have the identification of the training needs. The first is the organizational analysis. Organizational analysis is basically a systematic study of the organizational objectives, resources, resource allocation, utilization, growth potential, and its environment. Its purpose is to determine whether training emphasis should be placed in the organization for increasing the organizational effectiveness, and it involves the following: analysis of the objectives. Objectives of the short-term objectives and their relative priorities should be properly analyzed, and the specific goals for certain various departments should be stated, which will serve as a means of achieving the overall organizational objectives. The management would have to examine what are the specific training inputs and would contribute towards the achievement of these objectives. Next, we have the resource utilization analysis. The allocation of the human and the physical resources and their effective and efficient utilization in meeting the operational targets should be analyzed. In order to examine the need for the training, it should be found that whether the adequate personnel are available to ensure the fulfillment of the goals or not, and it is also important to know whether the personnel performance is up to the required standards or not. Then we have the climate analysis. An organizational climate reflects the attitude of its members with regard to the trust, loyalty, openness, commitment to the organizational goals. The analysis of an organization climate determines whether the environment, when analyzed in different departments, is conducive to the fulfillment of their goals or not, and this will help in knowing the areas where the training is needed to improve the climate of the organization. Then we have the task analysis, the second part. It is systematically analyzed of the jobs to identify the job contents, knowledge, skills, aptitude required to perform the job. Now, particularly the attention should be paid to the task to be performed and the methods to be used, the way employees learn these methods and the performance standards required to the employees. Then we have the questionnaires, interviews, personal records, observations, and the other methods which can be used to collect the information about the jobs in the organization. In the task analysis, the main focus of the job, on the task analysis is to study the various types of the skills and the training required to perform the job effectively. Third, we have the manpower analysis. The quality of the manpower required by the organization has to be very carefully analyzed. It has to be done in the light of both internal and external environment of the organization. The economic, social, technological, political environment of the organization should be properly scanned to determine the quality of the human resources required. To achieve these quality standards, specific training needs should be determined on the following lines. First is specific areas where individual needs training, and two, the capacity of the present workforce to learn the new skills and behavior. The time frame within which the training must be imparted, and the job designing, redesigning, introduction of the new methods and the technology. Next, we have the setting of the training objectives. After identifying the training needs, next step is to define the specific training objectives and adopt the suitable methods to achieve these objectives. The overall aim of the training program is to increase the organizational effectiveness. However, each training program must also have a specific objective as increased productivity, improved quality, better human resource planning, better health and safety, prevention of obsolescence, and enhanced personal growth. So this is what in front of the screen is identification of the training needs. The specific objectives of training are increased productivity, improved quality, better human resource planning, higher morale, better health and safety, prevention of obsolescence and enhanced personal growth, which will lead to the overall purpose of the training, that is increased organizational effectiveness. These objectives contribute to the organizational effectiveness, and the relationship between the specific objectives and the overall purpose of the training is as follows. The training organizational setup for training. Organization should have a sustainable structure to impart the training to the people, enable the work effectiveness and efficiency. However, the issue of establishing a training center within the company has to be addressed from the very first question, whether it is really feasible to have a separate training centers or not. Then we have the advantages of in-house training centers. The training program will be under the direct control of the executives. The likelihood of a training program adhering to their objectives increases when the organizations within the organization, and if the training is a regular exercise, as the case of the software, the pharmaceutical and the other companies, then it is feasible to have a separate training centers. In such companies, the training of the staff continues throughout the year, so the overall expenses are reduced. Even the permanent staff can be hired for management and imparting the training. And in the second present competitive times, privacy is an important issue because the competitors can have a copy of the organizational efforts and offset its competitive advantage. Then we have an outsourcing training. There are arguments favoring the outsourcing of the training as well. Nowadays, the facilities required for training, such as the hostels, conference rooms, training facilities, are available very economically in the external and hired sources. Then we have the support of the top management towards the training, the amount of the training which is an organization wants to make, continuously the training programs, the flexibility in the training programs, and the privacy desired in the training program. In case of a company that has an in-house training center, the following issues have to be defined to achieve the objectiveness, like avoid clash of responsibility, organizational structure, the exact position of the training, etc. So usually we say that training, you have to take care of the training matrix, you have to take care of the departmental heads, the role and responsibility which each individual has to play, whether it has to be internal or external. So all these parameters have to be kept in mind before you go in for the best results for the training programs. And definitely for increase in the effectiveness of training, some of the written material, desirable material must be distributed beforehand, and of course the topics which need discussion, open dice should be given to them. And then after the training program is over, you have to have an evaluation that what kind of overall the attendees or the trainees they have actually picked up from the training program and how effective the training program is all about. Thank you.